Hey, what's up? This is going to be kind of a hard conversation to have. And I feel like I need to say something. Normally, I let this stuff really just sort of slide off my back or whatever. It's not that big of a deal when people make criticisms or whatever. And I honestly don't make a lot of YouTube content or anything. I just feel like I must say something about the whole Dragon's End meta debacle that's going on. So here's what I've got to say. I think that the Dragon's End meta is one of the most creative displays of gameplay and open world content that ArenaNet has ever done. I actually think it is the single best piece of content in the entire game. That said, I think it suffers from a few issues that make it perhaps a little too frustrating for maybe a majority of the player base. I've been one of the first people to say, hey, this is doable, but there's some things that are maybe just a little too random, or maybe it takes too long to get a group. Maybe it doesn't respect your time that well. For instance, I've said, hey, what if we removed that one buff and then adjusted the boss? Or what if we made it so that when you did the pre-event that you actually got 10 stacks right away? That way you don't have to be there an hour early. You have to be there 15 minutes early, or some variation of that. I've also said, hey, maybe we need to make it so that the invulnerability phases simply don't exist, that condies keep ticking on the boss. Or, maybe we need to make it so that the break bar doesn't happen at the same time as the tail, or that there's a harder cooldown so that it doesn't completely destroy runs and people don't feel like they're losing to just some kind of RNG or randomness. I actually really enjoy that the boss isn't completely scripted like a raid boss. I really like how the boss does it goes through like this cycle of random things, but I agree that the break bar thing, it's like a lot of variability. Perhaps the boss has too much variability. I also originally I thought the turtle behind the boss was a really good idea because it encouraged people to play together and come together and try to solve a big problem, a unique problem. It encouraged players to learn new skills and to put themselves out of their comfort zone. And as somebody who's developed a community for the last year or so around getting into endgame content, teaching people the fundamentals of the game, I thought this was like the perfect way to introduce people to something just a little bit more difficult. The problem, though, is that maybe it's like a couple notches too far. And that, for a lot of people, pushes them over the edge. When you have people that have given it 30 tries and they haven't gotten it, well, maybe there's something that we need to do as a community, or that ArenaNet needs to do, to make that slightly more achievable. Now, I've already mentioned some of those things. But ultimately, I feel like as a community, we've become so divided about something that should bring us together. And that really bothers me. Now, I've experienced a number of comments. People are very upset because I go, you can do it. For those that don't really know me that well, perhaps, I'm an eternal optimist. I like believing in people. I tutored all throughout my university career. I was a graduate teaching assistant and I helped students. I just love teaching and love creating a positive impact for people. So when I would go and I would be like going and saying, hey, like, you can do this. Anybody can do this. Anybody can learn this. Let's do it. I wasn't trying to dismiss that people are struggling to do it. I was just saying, like, hey, I've been there with you. I have been in a situation where I didn't understand anything about this game. I had no fundamentals. And ultimately, what I did was ask and rely on the others around me. I went and sought out information online. I watched YouTube videos, and I sucked for the longest time. I was terrible. I got kicked from every group, and it was extremely deflating. But eventually, I figured it out because I relied on those around me. But now, even though I've said these things and tried to be encouraging, it's coming to bite me. The community has become so divisive that I don't even feel like I want to play. I tried to play strikes last night, and as I thought about forming a group, I was like, why bother? And I shouldn't ever feel that way, especially because I love this game so much. I mean, look around me. This room isn't even fully set up yet, but I've got probably one of the largest merch collections because I care, and I've been involved in this community for like 15 years, even since I was a teenager. I guess what I'm trying to say is that attacking people for wanting to help is wrong. And the way in which we discuss these things as a community needs to change. It's not us versus them. It's not like the hardcores versus the casuals. It shouldn't be. It should be, we are the Guild Wars 2 community. Let's lift each other up and work together. People saying that you're only as good as your weakest link, I would contend that you're only as good as your greatest leader. The people that go and say, oh, well, they suck and that's why we lost. That's completely the wrong attitude. I understand the sentiment. I understand the frustration that you can't necessarily control what other people do or play, but you can control how you treat them. If you go into a map and you notice that somebody doesn't have the right build or something, you can respectfully, that's the asterisk here, you can respectfully approach them and say, hey, we're trying to accomplish this goal together. No, are you dealing with the same thing? Are you trying to get the turtle? Yes. Hey, I have some tips about how we might be able to work together to make this possible. Now, you're probably thinking, that kind of dialogue is never going to happen. Well, let me tell you, I've based my whole community upon that dialogue, and there are people willing to do that. Of course, you're going to find people that don't want to do that. But hey, you don't want to be the one that people say is toxic or rude or whatever. Do your best to treat people like human beings. Lately, I've been getting a lot of people telling me that I'm ableist. And I apologize. I'm like slightly emotional about that because I think that is brutally unfair. Brutally unfair. I have a brother who has a disability and is in a wheelchair. I worked at a place that partnered with Make-A-Wish a lot to make playhouses for kids with terminal illness or disability. And I helped make those things wheelchair accessible or accessible to their particular needs. To suggest that I'm ableist because I believe that people can achieve things or because I want to motivate people to achieve things, calling me overly positive is just offensive. Saying that, oh, I'm ableist because I believe that we need to lift each other up and help each other. I think there was a comment on Twitter or something that suggested, what would you do if somebody was in a wheelchair and there were stairs? Just tell them to climb up the stairs anyway? No, I would go to them and I would say, do you need help getting up this? And I'd carry them up the stairs. I don't care what it would take. I would help them. I'd find a ramp. I would do whatever possible to help them. But I would never go to someone and tell them what they can or can't do either. To me, to suggest that we need to reduce the difficulty purely, and this is this important note, purely because somebody has a disability, I think does a disservice and is actually maybe coincidentally also somewhat ableist to say, hey, because you have a disability, you can't do this. That's so wrong to me. So wrong. I would never tell somebody who has a disability what they can or can't do. And I worked in an accommodated learning center teaching students with disabilities. I would ask what they're comfortable with or how I can help. And you know what? Sometimes they don't want help, and that's okay. And sometimes they really want help, and that's okay too. But to go and suggest that people are ableist because they think, hey, like, maybe we need to work together. Maybe we can find ways around this or overcome these challenges together. That's not ableism. That's wanting to help. I think that distinction is very important. But anyways, I suppose I just wanted to get on here and sort of air that. I'm deeply bothered by this. I think that the Guild Wars 2 community is one of the best communities of any MMO. I believe that the Guild Wars 2 community has a lot of good, that we're the first to help somebody when we see them on forums or on Reddit or whatever, that when we see somebody on Twitter that they say they're new to the game, that everybody celebrates it, says welcome to the game. I think we need to go back to that and remember that we're not all completely different. Just because we enjoy the game in different ways doesn't mean that we need to be at each other's throats. There are maybe a couple other things I want to touch on. I could have been a troll in my chat, but somebody said this is an open world event, and because it's an open world event, If I'm fishing, people are telling me that I should leave the map. Do you think that's fair? Let me pose this question to you. If you walked to a park and there was a party going on and they were using a particular part of the field or the space or whatever, and you noticed it was happening, and you were just kind of over in the field doing your own thing, but they were about to play a game of Frisbee or something, and they politely asked you if you would mind moving to the field to the left, which takes you 10 seconds, would you say yes? Or would you say no? I think the point is just to be kind and respectful and courteous always. For myself, I don't find it particularly difficult. I've walked in where people are having fashion shows in the game, or they're doing some other event. There's an HP train and I'm trying to lead the meta. And respectfully, I just go, oh, there's an HP train. I'll shift to another map to do the meta. Or, oh, you're doing X, then I'll shift to the other map to do this. I've never found that to be particularly difficult or to be something that I've worried about. When I used to actually do world record Drakkar runs, and I used to frequently say in map chat, hey, if you're not interested in doing the meta, there are people on our friends list in our guild that are interested in getting into this instance of the map. If you're working on a puzzle or you're doing some other event, would you mind quickly going to your guild hall and coming back so that you're in a different instance of the map? Or completing the event that you're on and then doing that? That would help us a lot. Thanks. Now, I can't guarantee that every person's going to do that, nor should I try to police that. But I think it's about respecting each other. So when you go into if I were to go into a Dragon's End map and there was a fishing party of 50 on the skiffs, I would celebrate that and I would move my group to a different, emptier map where there aren't tags up, where people aren't doing a special event. And I would respectfully allow them to continue while also doing my own thing. I think it's about respect, and I wish that we would acknowledge that more. I also want to talk about the sort of division among content creators. To that, I'll say this. I think that we have some of the best content creators in the game. I think people are passionate, they care. And we may have different perspectives on things. We may view something as one way and the other person views it another. But the way in which you communicate with each other is key. Because in a sense, as a content creator, people are looking up to you. The community is looking at you as a pillar of the community. And if you're not willing to uphold that, then they're going to act in the way that you do as well. So if we have an intense amount of negativity, if you're freaking out about X or Y, if you're attacking another streamer, that's only going to permeate throughout the rest of the community, and your community members will attack somebody else's community. And then the greater good of the Guild Wars 2 community as a whole is damaged. So I'm literally begging everybody to just be kind to each other. I find it so distressing. I was up late last night thinking about it. I'm really bothered by what's being written on Twitter. Can't we all just be kind to one another? I don't know. I think ArenaNet wants that. I think they're going to change the meta, and I think they're going to do some good with it. I hope they don't nerf it into oblivion, but I hope that they do tweak things so that it's more maybe slightly less RNG, slightly more time friendly. And that way, in a sense, it'll be easier to get more reps. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say. I just wanted to clear the air. This has been a tough few days for me, taking a bit of a break from my stream. I just need to find some joy back in the game, I suppose. I'm somebody who, when I look outside, I prefer to look at the flowers rather than weeds. But sometimes the weeds really overtake the flower bed, and I think that's one of these times. So maybe it's best that I just close the blinds for a bit. Anyway, curious, do you agree? Am I way off base here? In summary, I don't think it's fair to call people ableist when they actually want to include people who maybe suffer from one disability or another. I think there's a distinction between accessibility and difficulty. And I think there are things about the meta that are not perfect that need to be tweaked. But the way in which we discuss that doesn't need to descend into some sort of horrible, like us versus them, big attacks. I mean, I've had people that have completely misconstrued something that I've said, taken it in the worst possible way, and then immediately left my Discord or immediately blocked me on Twitter. And that's just not healthy. If you want to have a discussion, I'm all ears. I would love to talk this out with people and ensure that, you know, we're not just at each other's throats all the time. Genuinely, I really respect everybody in this community and I value everyone's opinions. The last thing that I will talk about is the streamer privilege thing. I think people have a good point in saying that if you're a part of a community, that you will have an easier time with this meta, strictly because people are going to glob together with similar values. This meta has exacerbated the problem of mixed goals within groups. What I mean by that is this. In the raid LFG, typically people will ask for KP. They do that only because they're trying to find people with similar skill level and similar motivations and goals. When you don't ask for things like KP, what happens is you have a mixture of expectation. And when those expectations aren't aligned, people get frustrated and lash out at each other on both sides, and neither is a positive thing. I think a lot of times people try to talk about the casual players versus the elite players or whatever. I think, honestly, it's a massive spectrum. It's not a dichotomy. Everyone's at a different skill level. I'm certainly not like a super elite player. And I'm definitely not, you know, brand new to the game or anything either. But what I will say is this event has really highlighted the problem with mixed expectations in a group, and perhaps the need for an ability to for people to better recognize their contribution to the team. I think that because that's not so in people's faces, people don't know how to contribute to the team. I actually think that for the most part, I'd be really, please comment if you disagree with this, but I think for the most part, when you're in a group event, like a big meta event, that you want to contribute and be part of a team. There's some sort of collective consciousness going on. We're all in this together. We're all fighting this thing. And so some level of organization, whether it be through subgroups or just joining the squad or providing boons for others, I think people actually want to be involved in that for the most part. Now, do people want you to switch to classes and put on specific builds and do all of these things and create the perfect raid composition? I don't think that that's fair for a meta event. But I also don't think that this meta event necessarily requires that. I think it certainly helps, just like it helps in every other piece of endgame content. But I think it's actually very doable. But the one shift that needs to happen is that every player, or most players in the map, need to have the same goal. They need to want to work together to provide boons and do this. The issue is that you can't guarantee that everyone's going to have that same mentality going into an open world meta event. And that's, I believe, where much of the friction is. Anyways, I'm not even sure exactly how you deal with that or what you think. Do you make a private instance? Do you put different skill like markers, like if you kill it in X time or whatever? Do you add 5 minutes? I don't know. Personally, I don't want to see it become way easier, but I do want to see them fix a lot of that variability that I spoke about before. Anyways, I'm asking for kindness. I hope that the community can come together through this. It's been a bit of a roller coaster for me. I'm going to take a few days off, but I wanted to make this video so that I could just air this out and sort of let it go. I think I've been holding this and it's been harming my own mental health and my own outlook on the community. And I really care about the community enough that I stream this game and that I try to help people. Know that my intentions are to just want to help and encourage. I would never try to rub this in other people's faces or whatever. I have always, and maybe it came off the wrong way in some instances, but really I just want to help. And if anybody wants help with this, please reach out to me. Anyway, to sign off. Go out, be good, be kind to one another, do good things. Don't let your dreams be memes unless that's what you're into. And stay classy, my friends. And we'll catch you next time, okay? See you on the weekend.